In this video, we look at MARSA and T-6 rendezvous procedures. In T-6 training, there are several special syllabus requirements that introduce the very basics of mid-flight formation join-ups and aerial refueling. This video will only cover the basic concepts required to meet the objective of these SSRs. In future training, you'll learn about rendezvous and aerial refueling in much greater detail. The source documents used for this lesson are the ATP 3.3.4.2 publication, JO 7610.4S and 7110.65W, and the T1 operating manual 11-247. As you already know, formation is flown by military aviators for mutual support and to conduct aerial refueling. Up to now in your T6 formation training, you've been taking off at the same airport and time with another T6 for two-ship formation training. With aerial refueling operations, often the tanker and receiver aircraft do not take off at the same airport or at the same time. For this reason, in T6 training, we will introduce some of the procedures used for two aircraft to join up that did not take off together as a formation. To accomplish this training, each T6 will depart single ship to a designated meeting point at different times. In aerial refueling terms, the meeting location is either the initiation point or control point, depending on the type of rendezvous planned. Each aircraft arrives at a specific time, known as the control time. In T6 training, the rendezvous location and time are determined by the students and discussed as part of the mission brief. Published air refueling track information is found in the AP1B. The waypoints, frequencies, altitudes, and scheduling agency are listed for each area. For the T6 SSRs, the pilots of the formation should designate their own rendezvous location, altitude, time, and interplane frequency. The control point can be within a MOA, over a GPS waypoint, or ground-based nav aid. For the purposes of T6 training, number 1 is the tanker, and 2 is the receiver. Each student should have an alternate mission planned in the event the other aircraft is unable to take off or meet up after a reasonable amount of time beyond the control time, typically 10 minutes. In order to join up as a formation in flight, we need to discuss how to go from being a single ship flight to becoming a formation. In general, formation flights must be pre-coordinated between the pilots of each aircraft. To accomplish the T6 SSRs, we'll first talk about MARSA, which stands for Military Authority Assumes Responsibility for Separation of Aircraft. MARSA is used to get 2 or more aircraft together, typically as a standard formation. Standard formation is where the aircraft are flying within 1 mile and 100 feet of each other. Non-standard form is any time the aircraft are greater than these parameters. Only the tanker will declare MARSA. 3 conditions must be met before the tanker can accept MARSA. Radio contact has been made by the receiver, positive altitude separation has been established, and positive position identification of the receiver has been confirmed. Once MARSA has been accepted, the tanker is responsible for receiver navigation and communication with ATC. MARSA ends when the tanker advises ATC that each aircraft is vertically positioned within the refueling airspace and ATC acknowledges MARSA is terminated. Once MARSA is established, the receiver maintains 1,000 feet of vertical separation, typically 1,000 feet lower than the tanker, until within 1 mile and visual contact of the tanker. In the T6, once 2 advises lead their visual, lead will clear the receiver to either close trail, fingertip, or route. As number 2 begins their closure to the designated position, lead should accelerate from best endurance to the refueling speed. 180 knots is the recommended speed for lead to fly unless otherwise briefed. If lead chooses to have 2 join to close trail, 2 should call in once 1 to 2 ship widths in trail. Number 1 then begins maneuvering and the SSR is complete. We'll now look at rendezvous in a little more depth. For US aircraft, 3 types of rendezvous are used: Alpha, Delta, and Golf. In this lesson, we will not cover the Delta rendezvous, also known as the point parallel, since it is the most complicated of the 3 and cannot be properly flown in the T6 Alpha since we do not have a TACAN receiver or turn range and offset charts. Pilots that end up flying the T1 or tanker and heavy aircraft operationally will learn all about the point parallel rendezvous in those aircraft. The rendezvous alpha, also known as an anchor track or fighter turn-on, is used primarily with fighters via radar lock-on and visual acquisition, but may also be used by heavies. Anchor refueling areas are often managed by a radar controller, who can vector the receiver to the tanker if needed. Tankers may maneuver within the confines of the anchor area to facilitate join-ups and to avoid weather. Typically, the tanker orbits within the confines, and the receiver maneuvers to roll out behind the tanker to complete the rejoin. Once joined in the contact position, the tanker maneuvers as desired to stay within the area. Here, number 1, the blue aircraft, heads to a MOA and orbits in the middle of the assigned area at best endurance at the briefed refueling altitude. 2 takes off just after lead and stays in the close pattern for 5 to 10 minutes before departing for the MOA. On departure, each aircraft is squawking their individual local transponder code. En route to the MOA, lead advises ATC they are single ship and 2 will be joining them in the MOA shortly. Once in the MOA, number 1 will fence in but not switch to the discrete frequency since MARSA still needs to be declared by lead. When checking in with departure, number 2 advises ATC they are joining the lead aircraft in the MOA. On interplane, 2 also updates lead of their altitude and location so MARSA can be declared by lead. Once cleared into the MOA, 2 will maintain 1,000 feet below lead until visual contact is made. Once 2 tells lead they are visual, lead will clear 2 to the desired position. As 2 begins the climbing rejoin, they will put their TAS and transponder in standby. 2 will report when in if cleared to close trail. Lead can then begin maneuvering as normal. The Rendezvous Golf, also known as an en route rendezvous, uses timing control techniques to arrive on time at the IP and fly towards the CP. If the en route rendezvous is used to accomplish the T-6 SSR, the pilot should designate the location of the initiation, control, and exit points. Number 1 will arrive at the IP at or before the control time at the refueling altitude. 2 should arrive at the IP 1,000 feet below the refueling altitude at the control time. If lead arrives before the CT or 2 is delayed, lead should orbit at the IP at best endurance speed. Like with the Alpha rendezvous, lead will declare MARSA once radio contact, altitude, and location of 2 is established. Lead should plan to cross the IP at 180 knots approximately 20 seconds before 2 does in order to be 1 mile in front of number 2. Both aircraft then fly towards the CP while 2 gradually joins to either left fingertip, route, or close trail as directed by lead. The rendezvous into close formation ideally occurs before reaching the CP. Once joined in close formation, the aircraft continue past the CP on the refueling track towards the exit point. In actual aerial refueling, receiver overrun and emergency separation procedures, called a breakaway, exist. We won't get into those procedures as they will be taught in your future training. For the T-6, revert to your normal overshoot, breakout, and terminate procedures should the rejoin not go as planned. That completes this lesson on MARSA and basic rendezvous procedures. When it comes to actual aerial refueling, there is much more left to learn about it. This lesson is meant only to provide enough background information and guidance to accomplish the mid-mission join-up and simulated air refueling SSRs. When planning to accomplish these SSRs, it is essential the plan be thoroughly briefed and understood by all pilots in the formation. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask an IP or the training shop.